This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Okay. I gotta get the instructions here better. Okay. Bezos Hashem. Today's daf is daf Pei Gimel, and we will begin daf Pei Beis Amid Beis by the yellow Amma Rav Yehuda Amma Shmuel. So let us begin. Okay, here we go. Now let us begin. We are discussing over here that the husband has a right to mayfair his wife's neder. You nullify any neder that she makes that causes intense pain for her. The Torah says, Isha Yifirena. Look at that. Isha Yifirena. You see that on the screen? That the husband has a right to nullify all the nedarim. So the question is, now, only if it's intense pain. Let's say, I was discussing this with somebody. Let's say a woman is hooked on Dunkin' Donuts and she makes a neder, she's never drinking Dunkin' Donuts. So this is a neder by being deprived from that coffee. She is in putting upon herself in some ways intense pain. So it's a bad example, but it's an example of where a husband can mayfair such a neder. But there are sometimes she makes a neder where being deprived of it doesn't cause any pain to her. Let's say she makes a neder, I'm not eating cat food or something like that. So of course it's not something that he could mayfair. He can nullify because it's not something that causes intense pain to her. That's the key word over here. So now let's read the Gemara. So the Gemara is dealing with a discussion is like this, an interesting discussion. Okay, here we go. Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Nadra mishtei kikaros. A woman made a neder on 2 loaves of bread. Okay, she's not touching these 2 loaves of bread. Ba'achas, one of the loaves of bread is a quality bread. It's human bread. So what humans eat, mis'ana. She, by being deprived from it, she's causing pain for herself. Okay, so certainly that bread, the husband could be made for. Uba'achas ein misana. But one of the breads is, let's say, not a human consumption type of bread or coarse bread, where if she's deprived from that, she's not, going to miss out. It's not something that people eat. And therefore, she's not really causing herself pain by being deprived of that other bread. So in one neder, she made against 2 loaves of bread. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, because she can nullify the bread that causes her intense pain, right? He can nullify the bread that doesn't cause her pain, being deprived from that. So it's like once we allow the husband to nullify part of the neder, she can nullify the entire neder. Since there's one neder on 2 kikaros, on 2 loaves of bread in one shot, there's one big neder against both of them. One part, since he could be nullified, the part of the neder that deals with a bread that being deprived of would cause her pain. So the husband has a right to nullify such a neder. So also his nullification will be effective on the part of the neder that as a standalone, he would not be able to nullify such a neder because it doesn't cause her pain by being deprived from it. But since it's linked or circled in one group with the bread that does cause her pain, so since he can be made for that part of the neder, he can be made for the entire neder, even the part of the neder that does not cause her any pain by being deprived of. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel learned, and he learns this pasuk kol neder ishi yiferenu. Sometimes the husband has a right to nullify an entire neder, even though parts of the neder deal with stuff that he does not have a right to be made for, but since part of the neder does, he can nullify the entire neder. That is the opinion of Yehuda Shmuel. Rabasi Rabbi Yochanan, no, meifer lemisana. He can only nullify the bread that causes her pain by being deprived from. The ein meifer l'she'ein misana. He cannot nullify the part of the bread that caused the part of the neder that does not cause her any pain. So it only works halfway. The Ika de Amre and others explain it. Ravasi Rabbi Yochanan. Ravasi asked a question from Rabbi Yochanan. Again, it's the same idea. It's just in a question-answer form. where Rabbi Yochanan, they asked Rabbi Yochanan, Nadra mishtei chikaros, if a woman made a neder not to eat 2 loaves of bread, but achas, one of the loaves of bread, mis'ana, by being deprived of, it causes her pain, and therefore a husband could nullify it. Uba achas ein mis'ana, but one of the breads that she made a neder is something that doesn't cause her pain by being deprived of. It's like a coarse bread. Mahu, can the husband be made for the entire neder all at once and nullify the entire neder? Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan said no. Mefer l'mis'ana. He could only nullify the part of the bread, the part of the neder that causes her pain, the bread that is high human quality bread. The ein mefer, his nullification does not work l'she'ein mis'ana, to the part of the neder that does not cause her pain, and therefore it remains half effective. So the Gemara asks a question against Rabbi Yochanan. A woman can make a neder, she wants to become a nazir. As a nazir, let's think about this. A nazir has 3 parts, basically, maybe more. But one of the things that a nazir cannot do is drink wine. But not only can he drink wine, he can't, if a lady makes a neder, she wants to be a nazir, she cannot drink wine, but she also cannot eat grape seeds or grape skins. And she cannot be metamal mason. Okay, those are the things that a nazir does. But the husband has a right to be mefer, to nullify. If his wife wants to become a nazir, he can have override and say, nope, you're nullified. You're not a nazir. Now, what do you see from there is that by depriving herself from wine, that causes her pain. I understand why the husband could nullify that part of the neder. But how could he nullify the nazirist, where she's basically saying, I want to be a nazir, that prohibits her from eating grape seeds? Grape seeds is a seed. It's not something that being deprived of would cause her pain. So how can the husband nullify that? And that's going to be the question against Rabbi Yochanan. Let's see, inside. Esvei, let us ask the question. The bright Mishnah says, so Isha Shanadra ben Nazir. A woman made a neder, she wants to become a nazir. And she was drinking wine, and she was defiling herself by touching dead people. Okay, by touching a dead person. So then, of course, she made a nazir. A woman could become a nazir, and she's doing all this. We go to Pei Gimel Lamed Aleph. She gets the malchus, the lashes of 40 lashes. But Heifa la Bala, let's say the husband nullified that neder. He says, I don't want you to be a nazir. And she has no idea that she was nullified. And she thinks she's still a nazir. She didn't hear that her husband said it's nullified. And she was drinking wine and touching dead bodies. So really, by the husband nullifying the naziris, she's no more a nazir anymore. So she doesn't get malchus of 40. Okay, now the question of the Gemara is obvious. How could a husband ever nullify the entire naziris of his wife? Really, he can nullify the part that she says, because she says, I want to be a nazir. She can nullify the part that says that she's prohibiting of her upon herself wine. Okay, I can hear that. But how could the husband nullify the part of the naziris where she is effectively saying that I'm not going to eat grape seeds? Grape seeds is not something that causes her pain by being deprived of. So how could the husband ever nullify that? That's what the Gemara's question is. The Amrit, if you want to say meifil mis'ana, that a husband can only nullify stuff that causes her pain, of the ein mefer, but he cannot nullify nedarim that do not cause her pain, which ein mis'ana that doesn't cause her pain. Let's skip this dilma. So I can understand how a husband could be nullify his wife's naziris. Minyayin the islate Sarah, from the part of the naziris that she's prohibiting herself from drinking wine. Heifalah, she has pain. That's by being deprived of wine, she has pain. So heifalah, then the husband has a right to nullify that part of the neder. Min chartza mizag, but from the grape seeds and from the peels of the grape. So loy heifalah, he should not have the right to nullify that part of the naziris. So effectively, she should be considered to be a nazir. Because she has no pain. So she has no pain by being deprived of that. And therefore, the husband should have no right to to nullify that part of the Naziris. And therefore, if she's not nullified, she should always get Malchus. She's still a Nazir. When the husband says, I don't want you to be a Nazir, he's basically saying, I don't want you to prohibit yourself from wine. Okay, she can drink wine, but she still would be usher to eat grape seeds, and she would be usher to metamal mesim. So she should get 40 lashes. Why does this Brisa says if the husband nullified the Naziris, she doesn't get lashes? So this is a question against Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Yosef says like this. You're right. Rabbi Yochanan is correct. When a husband can nullify a neder, he can only nullify the part of the neder that causes her pain. But by Naziris, there's an exception. When a husband nullifies a Naziris, it's the entire Naziris. Ein Naziris lechatzoim. There's no such a thing of being a Nazir for half the rules. In other words, you can't say I'm a Nazir and I'm not eating grape seeds and I'm not metamal mesim, but I can drink wine. It doesn't work like that way. A Naziris is a one package thing that once the husband nullified, it's the entire nullification of Naziris falls away. Because ain't Naziris lechatzoim. There's no such a thing of being a Nazir to half the rules. You can't say, oh, I want to be a Nazir, but I want to take haircuts. That doesn't work. You want to be a Nazir and I want to be metamal mesim, that doesn't work generally. So therefore, since that concept does not exist, therefore, when the husband nullifies any Naziris she made, the whole Naziris falls away. Amalei, Abaya just asked the question. Ha-carbon lechatzi Naziris ika. You're saying, he's just questioning on the language that Rav Yosef used. He's basically said that there's no such a thing of half the rules of a Nazir. You can't take upon yourself that I'm a half a Nazir, that I'm only dealing with half the rules apply to me. But what happens if someone says, I'm a Nazir, but I want to do it half the time? A real Nazir is minimum 30 days. But what happens if he says, I want to be a Nazir just for 15 days? So would he be required to being the carbon? But Abaya asked Rav Yosef, according to the way you phrased it, it implies that carbon lechatzi Naziris ika, that it's possible that if a person takes upon himself time-wise half the amount of time for a Nazir, he would be required to bring the karbanos. And that's not true. The only time that a Nazir brings karbanos is only after he completes his entire Naziris. Then he's obligated to bring karbanos, which is 30 days. I just want to point the psukim out so you know what we're talking about. The Chumash says, right over here on the screen, that when a Nazir completes his Naziris, when he completes it, he has to bring 3 karbanos: a sheep for an oila, a female sheep for a chatos, and 1 ram for a shlamim. These three animals. So this only applies after he completed 30 days, not if he does it for 15 days. But the way, back into the Gemara, the way Rav Yosef phrased it, he implied that it's possible if you take on the rules, the entire rules of Naziris for half the time, you would be required to bring the karbanos. And Abaya took issue with that. Elam Abaya says the proper phrase is ein Nazir lechatzoim. You can't take on Naziris for half the time, for half the rules. The ein carbon lechatzoim, and you can't take on or required to bring the carbon if you're only going to be a half a Nazir for half the time. So half the time you cannot bring, if you're just a Nazir for half the time, you're not going to be obligated to bring the karbanos. So now Meisvei. Now, when the Gemara says Meisvei as opposed to Eisvei, because the Gemara is just asking, going off topic on a side question to Abaya. And then we'll get back to the discussion at hand. But first, the Gemara goes on a question against Abaya. Abaya got through saying that if a man says, I'm a Nazir for 15 days, he's not required to bring the karbanos. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, I'll ask you a question on that. We find Ha'isha Shenadra B'Nazir. A woman made a neder, she's a Nazir. Okay. V'efrisha behemta. And she separated all her animal. In other words, what we're trying to say is that a woman became a Nazir and she became Tameh. And the halacha is that when a person becomes Tameh, let's just go back to the psukim over here. When a person, a Nazir gets Tameh, all of a sudden he has to interrupt his Naziris, bring 3 karbanos, and then restart the count. to count 30 days. So let's say after 15 days, a person became Tameh, this woman became Tameh, and she designated 3 carbonates, which just means she took 2 birds, one for a chatas, the echad la'oila, one for an oila, and the sheep she designated for the asham. She had this all prepared, and she wants to do atonement for interrupting her naziris by violating the rules of the nazir. But then the husband decided he doesn't want her to be a nazir, so she cannot restart her naziris after she becomes pure. The husband said, "You no more a nazir." So basically, she never completed her naziris. Nevertheless, we say mevia chatas oif. She brings the chatas oif, the bird that designated for a chatas that she brings, but she doesn't bring the bird that was designated for oila. Okay, so basically, she's not, but we still see that she's no more a nazir anymore, and yet she didn't complete being a nazir because she doesn't have to recount because her husband nullified her naziris, and yet she's bringing kagabarnas. The Amrit in carbon chatzin naziris, that if someone only fulfills time-wise, didn't complete the minimum time to being a nazir, will not bring a carbon. Amai mevia chatas oath. Why is she bringing a chatas oath? She shouldn't bring any carbon because she's no more nazir, and she's not, the obligation for naziris is no more on her, and what she tried to do until she became tameh was not even considered to be a nazir. So the Gemara says, okay, ve'ela ama, you want to say yesh carbon lechatzi naziris, that she would have to bring, that if someone says, I'm a nazir for if someone says, I'm a nazir, and really they're supposed to be 30 days, and they only completed 15 days, they would have to bring a carbon. But shalosh behemus boilatu yichatas oila shlamim. In our case, when she became tameh, and if you're saying, and she's no more nazir anymore because the husband nullified the naziris, then why is she only bringing a chatas oath? She should bring the bird for a chatas, the bird for an oila, and the keves for a shlamim. Why is she only bringing one chatas oath? So even the way your premise is that there's yesh carbon lechatzi naziris, she should bring 3 carbonates, not just one. I will really tell you, ain carbon lechatzi naziris. There's no such a thing that if you're a half a nazir, if you didn't complete the naziris, you only made a naziris situation for half the time, you don't have to bring a carbon. So let's give it a good concrete example. If a woman said, I'm a nazir, and day number 15, the husband says, I don't want you to be a nazir anymore. Well, she never completed the naziris. She would not have to bring a carbon. But if she became tameh, and she's required, generally, if she became tameh, and the husband nullified the naziris, she still would be required to bring the chatas oath. Because chatas oath is something that we bring, even though it's not so strict, bringing a chatas oath when you don't have to. The chatas oath, the masiyah, she brings a chatas from a bird, rishum the chatas al hasafik, because the chatas can be brought even if you're not sure if to bring one. For example, a woman who gives birth has to bring a carbon oila and a carbon chatas, right? She gives birth. The Torah says you have to bring a carbon chatas and carbon oila. Let's say she gave birth to a sack. We don't know if she gave birth to an actual fetus or if it was just an empty sack. We don't know. If a lady is in doubt, she should bring a carbon chatas anyway. So chatas oath is brought even if you're not sure. So it's like a lighter type of carbon that you could bring even though you have doubts. Therefore, this woman who became a nazir and she became tameh, really the olas oath, and her husband was made for that naziris. The olas oath she shouldn't bring. The carbon ayil, the la'ashim, the keves la'ashim she shouldn't bring. But the chatas oath, we tell her to bring because chatas is a lighter type of carbon to ease your conscience, and therefore she should bring that. But really, again, what the Gemara is just leaving it by this din is that if a woman became a nazir and she says, I want to be a nazir for 30 days, and her husband nullified the naziris at day number 15, Baya explained it very clearly that she would not be required to bring a carbon because she only kept 15 days of her naziris, and the husband nullified the rest. Anyway, back into the Gemara, back to the topic at hand. The topic at hand was that if a woman made a neder that encompasses two parts, one part that the husband could be made for example, the bread, one bread that the husband could be made for, because by depriving herself from quality human consumption bread, she is causing herself pain. And one is like coarse bread, animal bread, which is food that's not normally eaten. And she made a neder, she's not eating that bread as well. So there was an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that said that because the part of the neder that the husband could be made for, the one that's causing her pain, that he could be made for, but the part that does not cause her pain, that he cannot be made for. So the Gemara asks a question again, back to the Nazir. Every Nazir, it's very interesting. Every Nazir, a woman who makes a Nazir, she's doing two things. She's not only prohibiting herself wine, but she's also prohibiting herself from going to somebody's levaya. She's not going to the levaya. She did hesped or basic kvaris. So the part of prohibiting herself wine causes her pain, but the part that she's prohibiting herself from being metama lemesim, from going to a funeral, that doesn't cause her pain. Now she's freed up. She doesn't have to go to funerals. And yet you see that the husband could be mefer, could nullify the entire naziris that she made. That's what the Gemara's question is. A woman that made a neder in a nazir, she's becoming a nazir, and she became tummy. And the husband nullified the entire naziris. They may be a life. She brings a karma chatas, but she doesn't bring an oil knife. The point that we're trying to say is that the husband could be mefer to nullify an entire naziris that she made. The amrit, if you want to say that when a husband is mefer, he can only nullify mefer lemisana, only nullify the part of the neder that causes her pain. The ein mefer, he cannot nullify lish ein misana, the part of the neder that does not cause her pain. He can only nullify part of the neder. But so therefore, let's skip. We go to Pegim Lamed Beis. So let's skip the Dilma again because it's not. It doesn't make sense. Dilma miyayin the islay tzara, when a husband nullifies his wife's naziris from wine that she has pain from depriving herself. Hefila, his nullification works. But metumas meis, the lesla tzara from tumas meis, that she doesn't have pain because depriving herself from stopping to bury people and going to funerals, that's not a neder that causes her pain. Loy hefila, he should not have a right to nullify the naziris, and yet you still see that he does have a right to nullify a naziris. How does that work? Now, technically, the Gemara could have said naziris is one package, and therefore the fact is that once he nullifies part of a naziris, you nullify the whole naziris. But the Gemara wants to give you another teretz, right? The Gemara says like this. The Gemara wants to tell you a very interesting thing, that a woman who makes a neder that she doesn't want to be metamal mason, not to go to funerals, that causes her pain. If a woman cannot attend somebody's funeral, that's a pain. Why? Tumas meis nama is litzara. The part of a naziris that prohibits her from going to funerals also is a painful neder. Why? The pasuk says, "V'hachai yitain eliboy." A live person should think about death. What does that mean? V'tanya hoyer ameir oimer Abeya says it's important to attend funerals. My diksiv, what's the meaning of this pasuk? V'hachai yitain eliboy. What did Shlomo HaMelech say that a live person should think about death? The yispid if he attends eulogies, yispid lay, they will eulogize him. The yifkun, if he cries when somebody dies, yifkun lay, they will cry when he dies. The yikbar, if he helps people get buried, yikbarun nay, they will bury him. So therefore, it's important for a woman to attend funerals so that when she passes on, somebody will attend to her. So therefore, the husband has a right to nullify the naziras because the part of the wine causes her pain, and the depriving herself from going to funerals also causes her pain. And even if a woman just says right out that I never want to attend a funeral, that is a neder that the husband has a right to nullify, and therefore it's a davarim she'inu nefesh. Okay, so we leave it as a machlokes that if a neder contains two parts, part that he could nullify, part that he can't nullify, it's a machlokes Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan whether if he nullifies part of the neder, does the whole thing become nullified or not? New Mishnah. Mishnah says, "Koinim shani nehana lebrius." A woman says, "I'm never benefiting from any human." Any bria means any human basically. And we'll assume right now that she doesn't mean her husband, because if she's saying I can't benefit from anybody, that means she's like she can't live because who's going to give her food? How is she going to eat? So she means to say is I'm not benefiting from anybody's gifts or anybody who gives me anything, only my husband. So Eina Yachal Lahafer, he cannot nullify such a neder. Why? Because she's not start. Well, the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yossi, and who holds that inui nefesh means intense pain. And here, there's a way she's not going to starve. Her husband will provide for her food.
And what if he's nifted? What if he dies after?
So that's what the Mishnah says. He, excellent question. You're right. You're spot on. If she will die, if he will die, so she could always go to somebody's field and collect the gifts to the poor, the peya, the shikha,
But that's still benefiting from people. It's somebody's field.
No, that's correct. But once it's dropped, it doesn't belong to that person anymore, and therefore it's like God giving it to her. It's like finding something from Hefker. It's not that person giving it to her. It's like she has a right to it, and it's a gift from God, not from the owner.
Reality is, it's actually would be impossible to never benefit from anybody. You take water; it came from a well someone dug. I mean, in the end of the day, it's an impossible restriction. You walk on roads that other people made. You use bathroom. Right. I mean, it would be an impossible thing. But yeah, right. I understand that her husband could provide, but it's not everything. I can't even imagine how it's possible to not benefit from something somebody did.
Correct. So that is a fabulous question. So what? It wouldn't be classified as the painful neder that the husband can nullify. But according to Rabbi Yossi, it would at least be classified as a neder that causes strife between husband and wife. If she can't benefit from anybody, so the whole onus of her survival is on the husband, so that causes strife. He could nullify that neder, but what happens is when he dies, the neder takes effect again. So that's the difference. If it's a neder
if the neder takes effect again, does that then she could theoretically die if she doesn't benefit from anybody because nobody's providing for her, unless she gets remarried.
Unless she gets remarried, right? Then if she gets remarried, the neder would take effect again. If she remarries him, the neder would not take effect.
Right.
Kohanim, Kahanim, Leviim. The guy has. This is not a woman. Now the Mishnah says, if a man has a field, I'm a man, me. I have a field, and I say, Kohanim, Kahanim, Leviim, Nanali. I never want to give my trumas and maasros to a kohen or levi. They're also to take the trumas, my matnas kahuna and the maiserishain. Yitlu bakal karchay. The kahanim could come and the levi could take his piece against my will, because I have no right to deprive them of that. But I have a right to deprive one kohen of elu, leviim elu nanimli. If this, I say, I don't want this so-and-so kohen, this so-and-so levi from taking my trumas and maasros, yitlu acher, then I have a right to give it to somebody else. But it doesn't have to be that particular kohen will remain usher on that. You see, unlike like you wanted to point out, unlike lekach shikha and peya, the gifts to the poor, any poor can take it, and the owner of the field has no right to decide which poor person gets it. When it comes to a giving trumas and maasros, the owner of the produce, he can decide which kohen and levi to give it to. That's called toivas hanoah. He has the right to decide which one to give it to. So therefore, he could deprive this and this kohen from taking it, but he can't deprive all the kahanim from taking it. Let's just finish up the Gemara. It takes 1 minute. Alma. So we explained the Mishnah at the end of the result. Alma, the Mishnah seems to imply after the misnazah delay. The Mishnah seems to imply that she's benefiting from her husband, because Michlal the Baal La B'chlal Briasi. Her husband is not part of all humans. Because if she deprived herself from every human, including her husband, she'd starve to death. Of course, it could be he could nullify such a neder. So he meant to exclude him. So aim a seifa. So the Gemara just doesn't understand. If she's being provided for by her husband, then why is she taking the gifts to the poor? She's not a poor person. Aim a seifa. Yuchaylu lehanas bleket shikopeya. But she can benefit from leket shikopeya. So from that part of now, if we're telling her that she can take matnas aniyim, gifts to the poor, that means she's not benefiting from a husband. That means she's not getting from the husband. Then it must be that the neder included her husband. So the Gemara is doing housekeeping on how to understand the Mishnah. Is the husband included in the statement that she's answering all humans on him? All humans on him. So then, it wouldn't make sense. That means that that part wouldn't make sense because she's going to starve to death. And if you're telling her that she can take leka chikam peya, but because if you're telling her that she can take leka chikam peya, it must be she's not getting support from the husband because then she's not poor. So Amma Ula explained it like we explained in Mishnah. La'olam really la b'chlal brias hu. The husband's not included in the neder. The neder does not include the husband. The husband is providing for. And the Mishnah is giving you another reason. Even if you want to say, that the husband is included in the neder, void any yachal he still can't be made for the neder. Even from everyone, including my husband, she always has that way out of collecting matnas saniyim, the gifts to the poor. So she's not going to starve, and therefore, that's why it's a neder that the husband cannot be made for, because she's not totally in a bind, because she always has a source of income. Rava just says lo'ilam ba'al bachal briyasu. Again, he's just explaining the Mishnah like we're going to explain it right now. Really, she meant to include the husband in the neder. Umatam kama, but why can't the husband be made for? Matam ein yachal. Why cannot the husband be made for? Nullify that neder. Because she can benefit from leka shikopeya. So the difference between Rav and Ula is when the woman says koinim she'einin nehena lebrias, does she mean to include the husband? So Ula says yes. But even if the husband doesn't supply her, let's say he's a cheap guy, she can still get leka shikopeya. Rava says she meant to include the husband, and yet she's not in a bind, and the husband cannot make for that neder because she can always get leka shikopeya. Rav Nachman seems to is a slightly different twist than Ula. Lo'ilam ba'al la b'klal briyasu. Lo'ilam, the husband is not included into the count of the neder. So she meant to not to benefit from anybody, excluding the husband. And this is what the Mishnah says. Nisgarsha, if she gets divorced from the husband, like you just, Steve, said, she can benefit from leket shikopeya, right? She can benefit of leket shikopeya, right? So therefore, that's what it means. Because the leket shikopeya doesn't really belong to anybody. Okay.
Why are we assuming that the only thing you can benefit in the world from is food? There's so much more, and you're talking about only going into a field and taking food. But there's clothing. There's just you saying she's going to take food and sell it and buy clothing. I mean,
yeah. I think, or it seems so odd, right?
Well, because the solution of the Gemara is that she can get food, but
right.
She didn't